Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. Join us each week or when you can. We enjoy exploring wellness concepts and reminding you to make time for wellness.
This is episode 65.
We hope our territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people within a reconciliation process. We're on the Haldimand Tract, located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land.
And welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. This is Sheila Webster, and I'm here with Elise Seifert. What's on your mind, Elise?
Hi, everyone. So today we're here to talk about our trip to India.
Yes, we're going to do a few-part series on this.
That's right. So for this episode, we were hoping to talk about the city of New Delhi and the environment. So Sheila, what did you think about the general environment in New Delhi?
Well, I found it quite interesting. I landed off the airplane. That was my very first arrival in India, was New Delhi. And it was so busy, so loud. All your senses were on overload. The smells, the sights, the sounds, the heat. It was overwhelming.
That's right. And I think you had arrived in May. So we weren't in the heat of the summer. It was just the heat of the spring.
Yeah.
So it was quite hot.
So hot. The amount of people really shocked me. People were everywhere. They were not only walking around, they would be sleeping under tables and under benches, and there were people under things and sitting on stairs and sitting in the middle of the road, and the roads themselves.
Oh, there's, 3 lanes, but 5 lanes of traffic. So people would just be weaving in and out of these lanes and just create lanes of their own. And a lot of people drove smaller vehicles.
Yes.
So motorbikes, or they had these taxis that were called tuk-tuks.
Yeah, I love the tuk-tuks.
They were great. So it's almost like an open air carriage attached to a motorbike.
Yes. And they didn't have lines on their highways or their roads, so you weren't really sure where the lanes were. And neither were the drivers. I don't think anyone was really sure or really cared.
No.
They all made lanes wherever they wanted, wherever they could fit. And it was interesting because on the roads, we're talking about motorcycles and cars and tuk-tuks, but there were also some elephants. There were also cows all over the place, and you weren't allowed to touch the cows. They were sacred. So I was told, do not touch the cows because you might get arrested because they're sacred, so you can't hurt them. So just don't touch them. Stay away from the cows.
I remember one instance, I was trying to pass on a sidewalk, pass a cow, and it headbutted me. Just went, and tried to headbutt me. Yeah, they kind of have full control of their area, and they're treated very specially. The traffic is just something else in New Delhi, and it's not just what you see, it's also what you hear. It's very noisy, everyone honking everywhere. And I always describe that India is vibrant. It's vibrant in what you see. Like the colors are so bright, and the smells and the people. I think it was very difficult to see so many people on the streets all of the time. I found the hardest part for me was seeing the young children who would come, and they would come right up to us because we looked different than most of the people there.
Yeah.
And they knew that we were visiting. So they would come to us hoping that we would give them money. And I found it really hard not to just do it.
Right.
But I knew that if I did start, then there were just so many. I can't even describe how many kids would swarm up to us. So to start with one, you'd have to just give out so much. So I think that was a part that I found really difficult. But I always tell people that I loved India. I loved India. The vibrancy of it. And people always say things like, well, wasn't it really smelly? And yes, like you could smell maybe unpleasant smells, but it was also full of spices and delicious food. Like it was very, very vibrant.
Yeah, like I don't remember that many unpleasant smells.
No.
As long as you like the smell of garlic and all their spices.
Tikka masala and so many spices.
I've never eaten as well as I did when I was in India. The food was phenomenal.
Phenomenal. The garlic naan.
Oh my goodness. And the way that they serve their food, they always serve it family style.
That's
so
right.
you order your food and it comes in these big dishes and they give you a dish and you just scoop it on your plate. So it's a big family style meal and a lot of vegetarian restaurants.
Yes, a lot of the country is vegetarian, so they would often have most of their menu as vegetarian options. So that was really great.
That is really great because I feel it's safer to eat vegetarian when I'm traveling. So I thought in India that would probably be a safe bet to go vegetarian. And although we did eat like maybe some chicken a little bit, and I know we had some lamb, but Elise was generally vegetarian at that time anyway. So
That's right. So it worked out really nicely for me.
It did.
And the sounds, there were so many sounds that you would hear all the time, not just horns, but also music.
A lot of music.
And I thought it would affect my sleep more, but I found it didn't really affect it. But I could imagine living there all of the time. It might be hard. Maybe it's something you just tune out as you live there, but it might be something that's hard over time for your sleeping patterns.
Yes, I agree. It might be. But I found that when we were in our room, it quieted and you got used to it. Like it wasn't as loud as when you were on the road. But I do remember, so because I said that was my first experience when I got to India was New Delhi, we get there and Elise and her friend and her mom were there waiting for me, which was really lovely because I just didn't know anything. I was a little overwhelmed. And they said, this is the best hotel. You're going to love this hotel. And when I got there, I would say that it was probably the worst hotel I've stayed in my life.
To give you some perspective.
And just to give you some perspective. So I was kind of like, oh my gosh, if they're saying that this is the best hotel, my standards need to lower a little bit.
Yes.
Because it had a flushing toilet. Like, tell me the things, Elise, that it had that was better than any other place.
Well, we had been staying in hostels mostly throughout Southeast Asia. So we had been staying in 15-person rooms.
Oh.
And our budget was $30 a day.
For everything.
For everything, including our accommodation. So we were typically spending between $10 and $15 a night.
Wow.
On our accommodation throughout our travels. So it had a shower that was more of a trickle, more than just a trickle.
Wow. Yes.
And it had a private bathroom within each room. So that was a pretty big deal for us.
And it had towels. I remember you saying it had towels and it had toilet paper.
Oh, yes. So toilet paper was pretty sacred when we were traveling through that area because not all of those countries typically use toilet paper. They just use running water. So it had toilet paper, it had towels, it had a private bathroom. It was amazing.
It had beds in the beds. So they were like, this is amazing. And I was expecting amazing. So I had to lower my standards a little bit. We really did like the hotel. And the other thing that we did have that was there was air conditioning.
A luxury.
Yes. So aircon, I think they called it there. So just to have an aircon in the bedroom was really nice. We did that. And the restaurants were lovely. The people were lovely.
Everyone was so kind.
Everyone was so kind and quite friendly. You could talk to people on the street. I did feel pretty safe there, which was nice. Like I didn't feel like I had to be concerned about my money or my possessions, or not that we had very much, but
no, we always made sure to keep our most valuable things safe and then just take what we needed for the day. So that was, I think, a smart choice on our side. But I agree that all of the people were always so kind. Whenever we would take a tuk-tuk, our tuk-tuk driver was always happy to share any important details with us about the site that we were seeing. We visited some tourist agencies, which they were very helpful for train travel because that was a little difficult to navigate. But we just found the people were so incredibly friendly and just so kind.
And on the financial side, it is an excellent place to travel because of the price per dollar for us. You could eat and sleep and not $30 a day, what they were doing. We were spending a little bit more, but nothing compared to what you would spend if you were going to anywhere in Europe.
That's right. Yes.
Anywhere in Europe. So the trains and the planes and the food were very well priced.
I think the food alone is worth a visit to New Delhi.
It is for sure. So hopefully we've convinced some of you to go to New Delhi.
That's right. And just experience the vibrancy of it all. The vibrant environment and all that you can see, smell, and hear.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is in the category of social wellness. I recently interviewed Jason Schreurs about punk therapy, and I'm so glad he reached out to me, including because I've enjoyed punk and new wave music since the 70s. The last time we talked about scream therapy. Today I'd like to ask about his experiences with a supportive punk community. Welcome back, Jason.
Thanks, John. Good to hear your voice again.
As a reminder, Jason is a music and mental health writer, host of the Scream Therapy podcast, and calls himself a punk weirdo living in Powell River, BC, a small coastal town in the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. He's contributed to projects by the Canadian Mental Health Association, Disability Alliance BC, and other publications. He's a graduate of the MFA in Creative Nonfiction program at the University of King's College. And when he's not writing, podcasting, or facilitating a bipolar support group, or doing other mental health advocacy work, Jason is screaming into his dented microphone and beating on his guitar like it's a percussion instrument. His book, Scream Therapy, A Punk Journey Through Mental Health, is available May 1st from Mansfield Press. So Jason, initially we were just going to do the other interview, and then you mentioned, while we were talking, getting support from the punk community. And that just kind of jumped out at me as something I'd like to talk about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So the very first podcast interview I did was about 3 years ago now. And the person I interviewed said to me, "Punk rock saved my life." And that just sent chills up my spine because that's how I always felt about it. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if I was speaking metaphorically or literally, but I always had the belief that punk rock saved my life. And it kept coming up in the interviews that I did, the people that I met, the people in the book that I wrote. And so, I tried to really think about that. And I realized, I was using punk rock and the punk rock scene as my everything. It was my place where I felt comfortable. I felt like I belonged. I felt well when I was at shows. That's when I felt well, and that I actually felt like I was as much of a whole person as I could be. So the punk rock community is very welcoming, and it's funny to say, but they're actually very warm people. They're very
I agree.
Like a big hug, and yeah, it's not how people would necessarily think about punk rock or metal for that matter.
I can remember going to a bar. And, lots of people with spiky hair and crazy makeup and crazy clothes and chains and all that stuff. I didn't really dress up that much, but I could see on the street, people would look at them and like, yikes, they didn't want to go close to them. And you'd be in the bar and they're the nicest people. They're the most approachable people. You're absolutely right. It's a really welcoming community.
For sure. And I think people in all walks of life have backgrounds in punk rock, and the person that you see on the street that you would never guess would be a punk rocker is. And so it's a mix of people who, are very forward facing and very outward about their punk rockedness, and folks like, me, who doesn't necessarily present like that other than wearing punk t-shirts. And
right.
It's all walks of life. I think there's a real misconception about punk rock being very whitewashed and standardized, and it's just not like that. It's a very welcoming place for people who are marginalized. There's a lot of queer people in the punk scene. There's a lot of BIPOC people in the punk scene. And that, to me, just points to the fact that it is a supportive community, and people say they feel safe there. That's kind of the long and short of it. I mean, you got to have a place of refuge in life. Otherwise, how do you feel comfortable in the world?
Something you said earlier too reminded me, so it saved their life. I wouldn't say that about myself. I wouldn't say punk rock saved me, but I definitely think I wouldn't be the person I am today without punk rock. And so for whatever reason, later in my life, in the last couple of years, I've really come to cherish curiosity. I've come to conclude that probably my favorite attribute that I have in myself that I recognize is that I'm a really curious person. That's part of what this podcast is about. I love talking to people and learning, and it's just amazing. And I feel like when I look back, punk rock was one of the things that really lit that up for me, lit up my curiosity, and made it all right. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to challenge things. You're allowed to think differently. But if we go back to what we're talking about, the punk community, what are some of the things that you've seen where there's a connection to wellness?
In some ways, it's hard to verbalize it.
Okay.
For myself, having a mental health condition, undiagnosed for 46 years, I always knew there was something going on with me that wasn't quite the same as the people I was seeing around me. You know, and I grew up in a really conservative small town, which is a logging town, you know, a mill town, and there wasn't a lot of people that I would consider to be punks. You know, there's a few metalheads, and that's kind of where I gravitated first,
Right.
was, you know, being a metalhead. And I still am. I still love both genres of music, but I felt like I was lost. I didn't understand what was going on around me. And then when I found the punk scene, it just really clicked. Like I kind of knew instinctually that it was something that I belonged to. And I often wonder why people gravitate towards it, especially folks who I interview for the podcast who are dealing with mental health conditions. And I think it's just because of the way that it's formed, the way that it's set up, the way that, you know, you walk through the door of a punk show and people aren't saying, "Get out of here, kid, you're a loser." They're saying, "Oh, cool, you're a freak and a loser. Come and hang out with us."
Right.
Like, you know, we all are. Like it's a self-empowered term to say that you're a freak or a weirdo or, you know, a nerd or whatever you want to say. And that's not really very common in society. You know, maybe go down to the gaming store and play Dungeons and Dragons, and you might have that kind of same come and hang out with us. But for me, it was like, okay, this is where I belong. I knew it right away. I felt so excited and validated and empowered by being at the shows and listening to these bands scream at me, and we're all cheering along and singing along, and, you know, we're jumping around. It's like this very communal, it just feels right. It just feels like you're around the people that you belong with.
For me, it was kind of the same and the opposite. So I was pretty nerdy. You know, I short hair, regular dress, I liked school, I liked reading. And so I kind of thought initially that if I went there, I wouldn't be cool enough, right? I didn't have the spiky hair. I didn't have the leather jacket or whatever it happened to be. So I was a little bit nervous about that, but you know what? I never felt judged. I never felt like that somebody was saying, "You don't belong." But now that I think of it, I'm looking around and there was a room full of people so different, like the whole spectrum of regular dress to the most extreme punk dress. In fairness, there always are a few outliers, people who are just really angry really angry and wanted to break things, the kind of the anarchy side. And unfortunately, they seem to be the ones that often got attention. But they were the minority, I think. And generally speaking, I just didn't have connection with them. But otherwise, I didn't feel judged, and I felt very welcomed in the groups when I went. So you're right. And it's funny because you're talking about stuff, obviously you've thought about it. And for me, I was just experiencing it and never really thought about what I liked about it. But a lot of the stuff you're saying, I can really connect to.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the folks that come into the punk scene and cause problems, it's like any community. You're going to have those people, and, you know, there always has to be someone that's going to cause trouble or be a jerk. But, you know, the cool thing is that, you know, the punk scene seems like they're able to mobilize quite quickly. It's not hard for them to say, okay, there's a jerk here. Let's deal with this. Let's get this person out of the venue. Strength in numbers. I think punk rock, like you said, it's one of those things that just has like a visceral reaction for me. And I don't really know why until, you know, like it just happens. Like I don't really think about it as much as like, okay, this feels right. I'm playing punk rock with my friends. It's super exciting. The songs are great. There's messages. For me, it's a very instinctual, natural thing. If I'm not part of it for a period of time, I really feel it. You know, when I came home from the hospital and couldn't do much of anything after being diagnosed with bipolar, man, I missed it. And I think that's a huge reason of why I started the podcast and wrote the book, is because I had to do something that was punk rock related, you know, whatever I could. Couldn't go to shows.
I just remember when I was younger, especially, if something went wrong, if something really bad happened, I would go down to my basement. Those were the days of albums, and I would pull out an album and put it on, and it would make all the difference in the world. Now, you have a chance, you're talking to different people in the punk community on your podcast, and probably unfair to ask you out of the blue, but are there a couple, you know, examples of things people have said about what they feel from the community or how they connect, or maybe how it connects to wellness?
Yeah, I think a really good example is Rachel Taft, who does the Feed Your Scene nonprofit, and she's in Richmond, Virginia, and she basically has a hostel, and she basically puts up punk bands for free. She's got some money coming in from grants and whatnot. She feeds them, she puts them up, and it's like their second home. Some of them go back on tour and they keep going back, and she's become a mother figure for them. So to me, that really speaks to the punk scene and how it, how we take care of ourselves within it. Another one would be people that are doing mental health work, but are doing it in a punk rock way. So, charities, there's a suicide prevention charity that runs itself very punk rock in the language that it uses, and, the kind of resources it provides, the whole idea of like, let's talk about these things. People are dying. How do we talk about this? How do we help? How do we support? To me, that's a very punk rock thing. And I come across that a lot in the podcast.
Last time you were on the show, you were talking about how with punk, there's kind of that resistance feel. And I was talking about, how questioning it can be. And I think that's what you mean by doing it in a punk way. Like you have kind of this attitude where you're not afraid to ask the questions. You're not afraid to take challenges and that kind of stuff. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Question everything.
Okay.
Be self-informed, learn about yourself. Support is huge. I do a support group for bipolar folks, and it's very much parallel in my mind to the punk scene. You're supporting each other, you're listening, you're sharing ideas. You've got someone to lean on. When I was not doing well at all, it was quite unwell. People just came out of the woodwork and they were there to support me. And, the ones that supported me hard were the punks, my punk friends, and, obviously my family and stuff as well. But it was the punks that kind of came to my aid. And definitely you got to question stuff. And I think that this is a self-empowered, let's call it a subculture.
Just before I turn to the last question that I ask every guest, just want to say too that one of the things I'm trying really hard to do, and I've really enjoyed doing, is instead of asking people why they believe in something, why they think something's important, I like asking what they get out of it. What do you get out of X or Y? And you've done a really great job at helping us understand, we haven't dived into why we like punk and, should we like punk, but just what are you getting out of it? And there's been some amazing stuff. And it's great to hear that there's this community out there, especially in the sense that it's helping people with mental health issues, in addition to just helping people feel like themselves, helping people connect and be curious and the rest of it. So thanks for that. Like the last time, as we said, we are a show about wellness and different areas of wellness, and we like to do a little mini check-in with our interview guests at the end. Are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of even one thing that you could do to foster wellness in that area?
I always think about this little short film that I saw where this person is texting somebody and they say, I'm really depressed right now. I really need to hang out with you, or can we please go for a walk? And then they reverse it and erase it all, put down their phone, lay down on the bed. I think I need to be better at reaching out if I'm feeling low. If I'm feeling low, I don't want to burden people with my lowness. I don't want to be that person that's going to be a downer. But in fact, people are there for you. And every time I've reached out to somebody, they've always been receptive and wanting to hang out. And, I always think about that little short film and, how and I've done that myself, text it and then erase it. Having the power to push the send button is something that I need to be better at, and the confidence of pushing it and knowing that I'm not going to get rejected.
I don't profess to be a medical person or understand how the brain works, but I do really believe that it's at the times where we need help, it's at the times when we're feeling low, that for some reason the impact on that is also that's the time when we're least likely to reach out and talk to people. So it's really unfortunate because you have that catch-22. So I hope you succeed in doing that. I hope when you are feeling low, you're able to reach out and just, hang out with someone even the littlest thing, just talking to someone might make a difference. So I wish you the best of luck with that. And thanks again.
Thanks, John.
You've been really generous doing 2 interviews with us, generous with your time. So thanks very much, Jason.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you. And hopefully people will check out the book and the podcast.
I'll be sure to make sure I put some links in the show notes too, so they can try and do that.
Sounds great.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. Today I just want to show you a glimpse of what I've been working on for one of my session contracts, because it combines 2 things that I've talked about previously. The first one, which is more recent, is the relative major and minor. The other part is, you might remember I was discussing this semi-vaguely, where I felt a synth bass thing kind of rising up, and I was describing all the things I was hearing and what I wanted to do with it. So this is the track, and the reason I want to show you what I've come up with is that it's completely different from what I initially thought I was going to do. 100% not even the same thing. I initially thought I was going to use lots of synth, maybe some strings, and do like a dark sort of rising up swell underneath the vocal harmonies. It took a completely different left-hand turn, and it ended up almost jazzy, vibey. I think, without meaning to, I was sort of channeling like Norah Jones vibes, if that makes any sense. The band specifically. So, without any of the artist's melody or lyrics, to avoid any issues, here's what I've come up with so far for one of the choruses. So, completely different from what I thought I was going to do, but that's why I wanted to show you. Sometimes you think you have all these cool ideas, in music I mean. I'm sure you could draw a parallel to other parts of life, but in my neck of the woods here, music, you get these plans, you have these great ideas, you actually sit down with the project and realize, you know what? That doesn't serve the song as well as this. And then it starts to write itself in a way. That's exactly what happened here. I had an idea, I had this huge plan, I had already laid out sort of which instruments would go where, how I wanted them to feed into one another and all that stuff. And then when I actually sat down to do it, I realized, you know, it's not the best move. And then this is what came out instead. Just one of those things. Life happens when you're making plans. Music sometimes writes itself very differently from the way you thought you were going to do it. That's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners and thanks for joining us. Please help spread the word about Let's Be Well Together podcast. Follow us and rate us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together and let your friends know about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
You know I love quotes.
Yes, you do.
I'm always keeping them. We also have a message that we talk about a lot, and it has to do with move that body. And so I came across this quote. Unfortunately, this source is unknown, and I couldn't find it. But the quote is, there's no magic pill, no special shake, no secret diet. Just get off your butt and do it.
I know. And I totally agree with that. But right now, I don't know if it's right now, but since Christmas, I feel like social media is pushing all these magic cures. Like, I don't know
Quick
if you've seen
fixes and drugs.
Like the gummy bears.
No,
you don't.
What's
okay.
that?
I don't know. There's these gummies that you eat and then they just
Make the fat disappear?
And then there's these metal things, like you can get metal earrings or a metal ring or whatever. And it somehow does something to get rid of the fat. You know, there just seems to always be these magic cures. And it's like, I want to try them because it's so much easier than going to the gym all the time. But working out and eating well just makes you feel so good.
I see these other
There's
ones.
so many more benefits.
where they talk a lot about, and I think there's some truth to it, but there's lots of articles I see that say, well, they're finding out if you only do 10 minutes of high intensity interval training, that's good as doing like an hour. Maybe that might be true, but, and all that stuff is good information to have. But if the message is, we can fit less working out into the day, you know, so you can get all this done in a real hurry.
Right.
I don't love that message.
No, that's true.
I think the message has to be, you got to get off your butt and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to make time for it.
Yes, I agree. But I do think that anything is better than nothing.
I do too.
Right? Like, I don't want to say 10 minutes is better than work, you know, an hour workout. I don't know if that's true, but I do think 10 minutes is better than nothing.
Right. But
and
I
if it's a
don't
way
think
of getting
that
you going.
The magic ab cruncher of the day, you only have to do like,
Yeah.
you only need 5 minutes a day on the magic ab cruncher.
Yeah,
and
this is a fat
and
burner.
you're going to get those, it's like, that's crazy because we all know that. And with Elise recently did those 8 myths on one of the What's on Your Minds.
Yes.
You don't get rid of fat on your stomach just by doing crunches.
No, you have to do the exercises, and a lot of exercises that you do, even if it's back or legs, they're working your core, especially if you hold your core tight and focus on it. Yeah, you're working your core.
The other problem I have too is for a lot of times, my experience was when I finally fell in love with a kind of aerobic activity that took a while, that wasn't like super high intensity.
Yep.
That's the one I could sustain, right? So if it's like, you're like super high intensity boot camp, yeah, and you can sustain that energy to keep doing that kind of heavy workout, hard workout for a few weeks, at least me. But then I'd either get bored or, you know, whatever. But when I kind of fell in love with going for long walks, long, slow runs,
Yep.
that's when I fell in love with it. And it kind of brings me back and back and back.
Yeah. I think that the high intensity stuff I can continually do that once a week. You know, it's not something that I continually do as my only exercise, because I agree with you. You will burn out.
But you know, definitely not saying not to do it. Like by coincidence, by irony. Is it coincidence or irony? I don't know. But today we're going to go to the gym. And I was just thinking a few minutes ago that I haven't been doing enough high intensity. So today I'm going to do a really hard session, which is 6 times 3 minutes, where you go hard for 3 minutes, like comfortably uncomfortable. So I'm going to do high intensity today. So I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying that the answer isn't these magic pills, these like getting it all done in 2 minutes.
I'm actually going to try something new at the gym today too.
What are you going to do?
I am going to try something that my brother was telling me about.
Oh, right.
So what he does is this exercise where he does 10 push-ups and then does 10 kettlebell swings. He says you have a minute and a half. So you take a break after you do those 2 until your minute and a half is over. And then you do it again 10 times.
And he said he's doing it quickly. So it's kind of like an aerobic side to it as well.
Boom, 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 boom. So
I'm guessing he's been working on kettlebells for a while. So I'm guessing that he does lots of different swings. But I think it's great if you do anything.
Yeah, because kettlebell swings are hard.
Yeah.
So it's something that I haven't done for a while. And I do like to switch it up, my exercise, just so that my body doesn't get used to it.
So you're doing high intensity today too?
Yeah.
You'll be upstairs, I'll be downstairs, but we'll be doing our thing. There's a thought. Popped up while running. Sometimes we can do something with an objective, but we don't have control over whether we'll achieve that objective. And that often happens when other people are involved, because you don't have control over what those other people are going to do. So I had a really good surprise. A nice thing happened to me recently, and it relates to my book, Accidentally Well. You see, I wrote the book for my kids. I came up with what I thought was an important life lesson, a series of them actually. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought I should write this down, because time flies and we all eventually disappear from this world. And I didn't want to disappear before I wrote them down. I wanted to at least say them to my kids, but the concepts were a bit hard to explain in just a conversation. So that's why I decided I wanted to write a book. Initially, I was just going to write down those life lessons, but then I decided to put some context to it. And then I got writing, and then I was having fun remembering stories and writing about stories and trying to make it entertaining. And it turned into Accidentally Well. So then the idea is, I hope each of my kids will read this, but I'm not the kind of person that goes to them and says, here, read this. Now, with an exception, I did ask Elise to help me with a manuscript, and she did help me a lot, which I appreciate. But with the other two sons, Jeremy and Alex, I just decided to see if they ever asked to read it. I can't remember exactly, but about a year ago, Jeremy asked to read it, and most recently, Alex did. And he just told me he finished it. And so it was a really great feeling because that was my hope, that all three of them would get a chance to read it. At least now I know that to the extent that I had these ideas, which I think are good ones, they can look at them, they can think about them, and if they work for them, I'm hoping it improves their lives. And for everyone else too, I hope anyone else who reads it, I hope they find it entertaining. I tried to put in some funny stories, some enjoyable stories, tried to make it very readable, so I hope they enjoy it. But I also hope, obviously, that they can get 2 or 3 things out of it that really help to improve their lives or to inspire them to make some changes for the good. If I read a book and I take even 2 or 3 things out of it that are really amazing, I'm thrilled with it. So that's my hope. So I had this great experience when the last of my kids told me they read the book. I feel like the reason for me doing it has now been accomplished. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
Hello, everyone. This is Elise Seifert here, hijacking Flipside today with my husband, Steven Seifert.
Hi, yeah, it's my first time on the podcast, and it's very appropriate because today we have a very special Flipside for you. We're going to be talking about how we met.
That's right. So Steven and I have been married. We're celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary, August 13th.
That's right.
2023. So we're very excited for that. And we actually met in South Korea.
South Korea of all places. So I'm actually from Ohio.
That's right.
I'll share a little bit about how I got to Korea, and then you can share how you got to Korea. So I had actually been teaching. I taught English in South Korea once before the time that I went this time. And I don't know what it was that drew me back, but there was something that I felt was unfinished. Now, I didn't go there looking for a spouse, but I did know quite a few people that have done that. But it drew me to Korea, and once I got there, I felt like it was a second home. The language came back to me, the Hangul, which is the Korean alphabet, came back to me, and it just felt the same, but also different. So, Elise, why don't you share how you got there?
Of course. So I had finished my undergraduate degree, and I was looking for an opportunity outside of Canada to travel and work. And I had gone to a job fair. And there I learned more about teaching English in South Korea. And I learned that they give you a lot of perks. They pay for your flight. They pay for your accommodations, which seemed like a better deal than maybe some of the other countries. So I think that was a big draw for me. So when I was looking to teach in South Korea, I had decided to interview for different hagwons. And we actually interviewed for the same position, didn't we, Steven?
We did, yeah. So I interviewed in November, I believe it was, or the end of October. And the interview went really well. And I was told so over the phone because that's how I interviewed. But they said, however, we've just given this position away. And I felt like, wait, why did I just spend this time on this interview if I don't have this position? And they said, but we have another potential opening at the end of January going into February. So I said, okay, I can wait another couple of months. And as it turns out, it was you.
It was me. I had that position. I was the one who had just interviewed. So that was such a strange coincidence. And it's pretty amazing that you held on to wait for that role. And you got to spend Christmas with your family before coming over. So that was lovely.
Absolutely. I think that's a feeling that people from Canada or the US or Australia, any native English speaking country that goes there, they miss those holidays.
Definitely.
Because while some holidays line up the same, others just don't even exist. And you don't have those people to hang out with. And speaking of hanging out, that is what we did for the first 6+ months that we knew each other.
That's right. We started our relationship as very good friends. We kind of hit it off immediately. So I started about a month before Steven started. And once he came, we lived in the same apartment complex. So we would often walk to and from work together. And I would say that our relationship was very much a friendship.
Absolutely, I agree. We had so many inside jokes, and often we were sharing those, and our coworkers didn't even know what we were talking about.
And we're just laughing and laughing, yes.
And there were a lot of, so we had a few native English speakers, that's how they said it, and then the Korean teachers who also taught. And the Korean teachers all looked at us like, who are these two? What are they going on about? Yeah.
And I think being away from all of our support systems in Canada and the US, so being away from our family, our friends, we really were drawn to each other, and we would spend a lot of time together outside of work hours because we were looking for people to fill that void that we had. So we started off as really good friends, and then our relationship developed into a more romantic relationship, probably 8 to 10 months after knowing each other. And that just happened to be at the start of the holiday season. So we spent all of those major holidays together, which felt really special to have someone that you knew so well and someone that you were so connected to spend the holidays with.
Absolutely. And we'll have to share more of the story in the future. Catch you on the flip side.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way. It is sign-off time, and it's John here with Elise and Sheila.
Hi.
Hello.
I got 3 things to talk about. The first, I forgot to mention this last week on sign-off, but thankfully I'm finally back outside running again after being on a treadmill for a few months and just loving it. Just really loving running outside. So that's been fantastic. Yesterday, I snuck in a long run. For the first time in a long time, I did more than 10K because that's kind of the most I'll do on a treadmill. And as usual, I'm like, I don't know if I'll be able to do it, but it went off great. I want to give you an update too about Sammy. So you haven't heard Sammy for a while, and that's because she is crazy busy. She now has 2 new businesses in addition to the existing stuff she was already doing, and that's not even teaching dance. So her way of keeping balance, which is something we're all trying to do, is she's taking a bit of a break, and we're going to hopefully get her back in at some point. But for the time being, we're supporting her in her new businesses, cheering for her, and hoping that she is keeping the balance. And then the last thing for me is we just had, Sheila might talk about her weekend because Jeremy's wedding is coming up in a couple of weeks. And so it was bachelorette party and kind of stag party. What we did with Jeremy is we had a poker tournament and it was so much fun. I just wanted to shout out to all the guys who came over. We had a lot of fun. There was a lot of smack talk, a lot of crazy beats, playing Texas Hold'em. But in the end, they were all so generous. Really big thanks to everybody. So how about you, Elise? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I just had a lovely weekend in Collingwood for our bachelorette party, and I feel so relaxed, and it just let me start off our week in a really good place. And I actually just started taking some pottery classes. So these are on the wheel. So I'm using the wheel in order to build different vessels using pottery. And it's a 6-week course. So I'm doing that every weekend. And it was a challenge. So just reminding myself that it's okay to fail when you're first learning a new skill, I think is really important. And the cool thing about making pottery is that you can reuse the clay. So you can really
I didn't know that.
You can just start fresh. You mess up, that's okay. You just have to rehydrate it. And then you can start with a fresh lump of clay and save that clay for next week. So it's a really great way to learn because you make a lot of mistakes.
So we're going to be getting some warped bowls for Christmas. Is that what you're saying?
Hopefully some nice bowls. How about you, Sheila? What's going on with you?
Oh, well, yes, the bachelorette was this weekend, so I organized that. So that was a lot of work, but we got it done and we had a wonderful time. Shout out to Katie K because she did our oracle cards, and I'm not sure if she listens, but she was awesome. So we're really happy with that. We had a great time. So it was a lovely weekend, but busy, really busy. So we didn't get home till 11:30 last night and then straight into work again. But I did get some gardening done this week. So that made me very happy. I got some plants in the ground And then I was actually happy to see the rain because I did plant some things. So,
Good point.
yeah, so that was very nice too. So 2 more weeks until the wedding. We're getting really close now. So I feel the pressure. I feel like I have to get things done and get everything organized. So hopefully everything
Can I
goes
add
well.
one thing? Something I talk about in my book is I really like blossoms now. Sheila got me a crabapple blossom tree for our backyard 4 or 5 years ago. And so every spring, I think it's amazing when they pop out because it's only really for kind of a week. And it's really only like 2 days when they're really at their highest. And I see some buds on the trees.
Yeah,
so it's
the
probably going
buds
to be
are
within a
coming.
couple of weeks. We're going to have that special day of the year where the crabapple blossoms are looking amazing.
Yes. So that's it for me.
That's it for me too.
Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.